Okay. All right, everyone. Let's all bring our conversations to a close, please. Thank you. It's so awesome, though, to hear your voices and to be here in community with you, just talking to one another. My name is Diana Delgado. I'm the literary director here at the Poetry Center, and I'm really, really honored tonight to host Victoria Chang. I do want to just say thank you for coming here tonight to be with us while we celebrate the work of Victoria Chang. But I also want to acknowledge that the University of Arizona community is still processing from a tragedy that occurred here on campus yesterday. I really hope that tonight's reading can bring us closer together in solidarity, in opposition of violence, and really encourage us to communicate with one another and hold each other in support in these times when I think it's really important for us to hold space for one another. So I just want to thank you all for being here with us tonight to celebrate Victoria and also to be here together in a place that I feel we really want to promote safety and just togetherness here at the Poetry Center. So thank you. A few just housekeeping things. Please shut off your phones, and that includes the ringers, please. Whichever of the two is going to work for you. Also, please unwrap any candies that you have. Any bags or toiletries or things that you're going to dig into, maybe just get it out now. That will be helpful for all of us. The other thing is we have books for sale. We have beautiful books by Victoria that are for sale. This is one of them, it's just gorgeous. The Trees Witness Everything. We have 3 of those books there for sale, which Victoria will be signing after the reading. So thank you, Victoria. I now want to remind everybody that next Thursday at the HSIB building, so please do not show up at the Poetry Center, we will be hosting Read a Dove on Thursday, October 13th. It's going to be a very big reading, just like this reading, but we just want to encourage everyone to just sort of understand that it's not here. Because we've had that happen because people are so used to coming here, but it's going to be further down this way to the left. Just go straight left, and you'll be at the HSIB building. That's next Thursday. Okay. I would like to share a few words about our introducer tonight, Ander Monson. Ander Monson's most recent books are Predator, a memoir, a movie, an obsession, I Will Take the Answer, and The Gnome Stories, which are all published by Grey Wolf. Yeah, awesome. He edits the magazine Diagram, Essay Daily, New Michigan Press, the Assessment Matters Institute, which is one of my favorites, let me tell you. Always liking that, whatever you do with that institute. And March Madness, among other projects. And of course, he teaches here at the University of Arizona. I want to welcome Ander Monson up to introduce Victoria Chang. Thank you, Ander.
Thank you. And shout out to assessment. It matters. You can go to askmatters.org, which is the Assessment Matters Institute, for assessment matteration, where assessment really matters. It's like an actual institute that I run. So if you'd like to be on the board, you can also just drop me a line, and I'm happy to have you involved. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a little while since I've been back at the Poetry Center, and it feels really good, kind of a homecoming, to be back here. It's also been a little while since I saw Victoria Chang reading, so I'm really looking forward to this this evening also. You have a treat in front of you. So yesterday, when visiting my creative writing class, Victoria Chang said something that, to be frank, kind of rocked my world. Responding to a question about which of the poems in one of her books she likes the best, even if nobody else does, it was my question. I should just say that. That wasn't my student's question. That was my question. I thought it was a good question. She told my class that she doesn't have any feelings about the work once she's written it. Like, none at all. She doesn't have any particular affection for any poem from Obit, her great 2020 book from Copper Canyon, in which she writes these kind of unhinged obits for her father's frontal lobe, for her mother, for versions of herself, voicemail, language, memories, civility, friendships, and a lot more. Nor did she have warm feelings for a series of my favorite poems from 2014's The Boss, in which she writes into and out of Office at Night, one among many Edward Hopper paintings that are written about and to and in the book. Nor even for her first very lovely book of nonfiction, Dear Memory, Dear Letters on Writing, Silence, and Grief, published by Milkweed last year, in which after her mother's death, she sorts through the objects from her mother's life, presents some of them to the reader, and uses them to ask questions in letters to, among others, her mother, grandmother, grandfather, a childhood acquaintance, silence, the body, teachers, her sister, daughters, the Ford Motor Company, and so on. You may sense a pattern here, how she builds or finds or adopts a form and then turns it to unconventional directions, to surprising and thrilling results. Nor will she even say she loves or is embarrassed by any poem from her first book, Circle, from which I saw her read some years ago in Muncie, Indiana. Might she feel a little more strongly for her newest book, The Trees Witness Everything, another adventures in form in which she uses Japanese syllabic forms called wakas and frames them with titles from W.S. Merwin poems? I suspect the answer is no. This is a very cool book, Victoria. How can you not feel this? I asked myself why I was so shocked at this statement and what it meant that I felt more personally attached to these books than she apparently did, and I do. I guess I shouldn't be shocked, though. As she puts it in Dear Memory, each book isn't just a book, but a period of life, a period of learning how to write, which is true, but it's also a book, isn't it? And a book is a collection of poems or essays or images or image text pieces or reproductions of objects, but a book is also a mass of things that collects and is collected. It's an architectural record of a life, maybe the best record of a writer's life, or the writing part of a writer's life, or at least of the writer's mind, which is, after all, one of Chang's primary subjects. As she told my class, my subject is always thinking. Yes to this, but the subject of a Victoria Chang work is also inevitably language and form and the ultimate inadequacy of both in the writer's quest to represent the world. Maybe this is why she doesn't carry affection for the works themselves, just the act of working, writing, wanting, as she puts it, wanting not only books, but to be surprised again and again by the possible collusions of language. Restless making with an imperfect tool is the thing that matters and gives the truer pleasure, Victoria tells us, not its result, the made thing, however beautiful and moving it may be. It's bizarre when you think about it that we use the same word for both act and thing, work. We work in order to make a work. Tim Gunn tells us from 2010 to make sure to make it work, to make the work work. That is, the work of art produces the work of art. So which exactly is the real work of art, my dudes? We come to art to experience whatever sliver of it we get, to act as witnesses to transformation, to be moved. Another Victoria Chang poem tells us, quote, we praise the artist, not the apple's shadow, which is murdered slowly. There must be some way of drawing a picture so it doesn't become an elegy, unquote. I still don't have the answer to my earlier question, what it means that I cared more for her books than apparently she did, except to say that the books are all that I have. These works are the only ones I can access, that you can access, that we all can access here tonight, except here tonight where we get a little bit of the worker as well as the work. So even if the books are diminished things by comparison to the work done to make them, they're still pretty damn good. I will take them. I'll buy them, I'll keep them and have feelings about them, and I think that you will too. So please welcome tonight, Victoria Chang.
Wow, that was an essay. How long did it take you to write that? Not very. 3 years. No, we met in 2006, so 20. Yeah. No, that's not. The math is not right. Yeah. 16. Yeah. Wow, that was impressive. Okay, so I'm here. Okay. So, thank you. I'm still recovering from that really beautiful essay. It's an essay. You should expand that somehow. No, I'm serious. It's very well done. Thank you. Thanks for coming, and I just want to thank the Poetry Center, Tyler Meyer. So many people have been a part of my visit. Diana, of course, Delgado, Paula. Oh my goodness. Has been emailing me long before I got here, and every detail is perfect. Ander, of course, genius right there. Gemma, Ren, Claire, and I'm sure I've forgotten someone, but thank you all. What a great community that you have to put these types of things together. Just one reading is so much work, and every detail that I experienced here has been really lovely. I also want to say I'm really sorry to the community here. It's something that I don't even have words for, so I'm still trying to process it along with you. I get to leave and go home, but this is your community, you're here, so I'm really sorry for what's happened here, and I hope that Palms can be a part of that process of sort of just kind of figuring things out, and my heart goes out to the family and the community. So I'm just going to read some poems, and I have a slideshow because I have been reading online a lot, and then I'm going to there's a book that I'm going to read from that also has some visual aspects. So then I thought, well, maybe just show the slideshow so you can, if you're a visual person, if you can see that far, you can read along or not. But I'm just going to read from 3 collections, and of which I don't have any feelings for at all. And I'll read from Obit, and I'm going to read from Dear Memory and The Trees Witness Everything. And I'll just set my timer just to make sure that I'm not reading too short or too long. So I'll start with my book, Obit, and it came out in 2020, and there's really nothing you need to know except that my mother passed away in 2015 after a long illness called pulmonary fibrosis, which is this brutal illness, if anyone knows anyone that has experienced it personally or indirectly. It's when your lungs harden and you suffocate to death. It is awful to watch someone experience that, and I wouldn't will that upon anyone on either side. And then my father had a stroke maybe about 15 or 16 years ago, and he passed away in January this year, but he lost all of his language. And so they just populate these poems. And they're just written in the shape of obituaries, and everything sort of dies. Let's see. Oh, there. Do I? Okay. Just down. Music. Died on August 7, 2015. I made a video with old pictures and music for the funeral. I picked Hallelujah in a cappella because they weren't really singing, but actually crying. When my children came into the room, I pretended I was writing. Instead, I looked at my mother's old photos, the fabric patterns on all her shirts, the way she held her hands together at the front of her body. In each picture, the small brown purse that now sits under my desk. At the funeral, my brother-in-law kept turning the music down. When he wasn't looking, I turned the music up because I wanted these people to feel what I felt. When I wasn't looking, he turned it down again. At the end of the day, someone took the monitor and speakers away, but the music was still there. This was my first understanding of grief. My mother's teeth. So my mother had dentures, and I tell the story all the time because I think it's interesting. I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that thinks it's interesting, but I, growing up, used to see little cups, glass cups of dentures floating around in soaking. And for my entire childhood and adulthood, I thought there was just one set of dentures. That is not true. There are many sets. So I found them and I wrote a poem about them. My mother's teeth died twice, once in 1965, all pulled out from gum disease. Once again on August 3rd, 2015. The fake teeth sit in a box in the garage. When she died, I touched them, smelled them, thought I heard a whimper. I shoved the teeth into my mouth, but having 2 sets of teeth only made me hungrier. When my mother died, I saw myself in the mirror, her words in a ring around my mouth like powder from a donut. Her last words were in English. She asked for a Sprite. I wonder whether her last thought was in Chinese. I wonder what her last thought was. I used to think that a dead person's words die with them. Now I know that they scatter, looking for meaning to attach to like a scent. My mother used to collect orange blossoms in a small, shallow bowl. I passed the tree each spring. I always knew that grief was something I could smell, but I didn't know that it's not actually a noun, but a verb, that it moves. Maybe I'll just read, actually, what do I have next? Oh, I have some short poems. So I also wrote, at some point, little tankas in here, and they were all at the end of the book, and my friend said you should scatter them throughout. And so I did, because I actually started thinking how he said they were all like written toward like to children or my children, but also I think the kind of obsessive personality that I have was that there's so many of these obituaries and they're so heavy and they even look kind of clunky in their shape that these little tankas, which are 57577, I think, gave me as a reader a little bit of break. So I put them in pairs, and so I'll just read these two. Sometimes all I have are words, and to write them means they are no longer prayers, but are now animals. Other people can hunt them. You don't need a thing from me. You already have everything you need. The moon, a wound on the lake, our footprints to not follow. And in retrospect, I think these poems, the poems in the Trees Witness Everything, which are miniature poems, really extended from these other tankas. So I think I started back here, but I didn't know it at the time. So I'll read one more from this book, and then I'll kind of move on. Grief. As I knew it, died many times. It died trying to reunite with other lesser deaths. Each morning, I lay out my children's clothing to cover their grief. The grief remains, but is changed by what it is covered with. A picture of oblivion is not the same as oblivion. My grief is not the same as my pain. My mother was a mathematician, so I tried to calculate my grief. My father was an engineer, so I tried to build a box around my grief, along with a small wooden bed that grief could lie down on. The text kept interrupting my grief, forcing me to speak about nothing. If you cut out a rectangle of a perfectly blue sky, no clouds, no wind, no birds, frame it with a blue frame, place it face up on the floor of an empty museum with an open atrium to the sky, that is grief. Let's see, keep going. Oh wow, I put a lot in here. So I think I'm going to move to a different book, called Dear Memory. And what should I say about this book? It's first I said I was never going to write about my mother. And then I said I'm never going to write about her again. But then, I don't know, she kind of hangs around. And I found a box, after she passed away, I found a box with a whole bunch of stuff in it. And I said this in Andrew's class too, is that, I found all these cool papers. And so I found out a lot of information about her that I had no idea about my background. I had no idea. I don't know anything about who my ancestors are or anything like that. But I did find all these papers. But the initial excitement changed to sadness because I had no one to ask those questions like, is this right? Who is this? And, I used to ask my mom those kinds of questions. So I started writing her a letter, and then this book eventually became a bunch of letters, and then also some collaging because there are photos, and then I wrote little poems that are on the collages, so I'll show you some of that. But I'll just read this first one, which this is just the beginning, so I'll read the whole thing is here, but it's not a ton longer than that. Dear Mother, I have so many questions. What city were you born in? What was your American birthday? Your Chinese birthday? What did your mother do? What did your grandmother do? Who was your father, grandfather? It's too late now, but I would like to know. I would like to know why your mother followed Chiang Kai-shek, taking you and your 6 or 7 siblings in a fist, if you held a small stone, if you thought the trees were black or green at night, if it was cold enough to see your breath, to sting your fingers. I would like to know who you spoke to along the way, if you had some preserved salty plums, which we both love, in your pocket. I would like to know if you carried a bag, if you had a book in your bag, where you got your food for the trip, why I never knew your mother, father, or your siblings. I would like to have known your father, to know what his voice sounded like, if it was brittle or pale, if it was blue or red, to know the sound he made when he swallowed food. I would like to know if your mother was afraid. During college, I spent several weeks with her in Taiwan. She bought me baozi, or buns, every morning, the bao that steamed in small plastic bags with no ties, and sweet doujiang, tofu milk, always too hot for me to drink. She sat there and watched me eat, complained to me about your brother's wife, complained of being sick and how no one would help her. Do you know how long it took me to figure out how to call an ambulance? And then when they came, she refused to go. I still remember how the 2 men stared at me as if I could move a country. Listen, it's the wind. That's the same wind from your countries. Sometimes, if I listen closely at night, I can hear you drop a small bag at the door. I hear the sound of the bough touching the ground and the wind trying to open the bag. But when I open the door, there's nothing there, just the same wind, thousands of years old. Happy birthday, wind. Happy birthday, mother. April 6, 1940. I know this now. All the nurses, doctors, and morticians asked me, so I memorized it. Your American birthday, April 6, 1940. I said again and again, as if I had known this my whole life. So I am not a visual artist, but I do like to dabble and doodle and all those sorts of things. So I just took some old photos, I put them on paper, and I started just messing around with collaging and things, and it was really fun. And I had a good time. So I wrote a couple poems. I'll just read this one. That the one in the white is me, and the one in the blue is my sister, and that's my mom. It's that classic 1970s wallpaper and the green avocado phone, and I just love the outfits that we're wearing. But I just wrote a short poem and put it on top of this. I hear the phone ringing, but I can't answer it. It is silence calling. Oh yeah, at some point, I actually remembered that I actually had interviewed my mother like a long time ago, and there was a recording somewhere, and I had forgotten about it, but eventually I found it, and then I had to figure out how to fit it into this book after I had written that I didn't know anything. And so that was kind of complicated. I ended up just transcribing the interview, and it was really interesting. Like, she gave me a lot of facts. And so this is a letter that she received from a cousin in China. And I just translated it or transcribed her translation of it. And it pretty much mirrors like what I learned in Asian history. She just found her cousin. She's 2 years younger than me. And the cousin, the letter was just really simple and clean, all facts, no feeling. 1950, cousin and family moved to Hubei and had to learn new thoughts. 1950 to 59, every 2 to 3 days, they had to participate in new movements to suppress the revolution and to fight against the Americans. They had to take all of their pots and metal doors and burn them to make steel. But moving away from farming led to starvation and famine. So that, I think, is a great leap forward. Then there was the Cultural Revolution, all the things that I learned about in school, the natural disasters that happened that led to famine. And then 66 to 71, the Red Guard period, Mao's little red book kind of thing was really fascinating to read the letters. The government doubted everything and everyone. They came to our house and took away all of our jewelry and money. And so she just, I heard her voice and I just kind of transcribed these and put these in here in collages. And that's just one of them. And there are more throughout the book. And that's another one that I think somewhere in here, I didn't write down the page number, but it talks about eventually how the father died in his 50s, had a brain hemorrhage, and no one was able to go to college or anything. They were all sent to the hinterlands to do farming. So it's just interesting to kind of match our family history with history, which was both interesting and tragic. And how, when one side of the family leaves a country, it completely bifurcates, and one side of the experience is so different than the other side. And that happens to a lot of people, so. And then I wrote letters to everybody. So I wrote them to my grandmother, my grandfather, I wrote them to the body, old teachers, and I think I will maybe just read this 3 section. It's just a part of the letter to my grandmother. Today I found a certificate of marriage and a translation of it by the President Translation Service. The date is July 26, 1939. Now I know your name, Miss Zhang Qi Ying. I also know you were 27 and grandfather 26. I wonder if this was considered strange at the time, your being older than him. I now know you were born on April 29th, 1913. Seeing this date makes me cry. The tears are long and rusted. I have tried to tie them together into a long string toward your country. The farthest I've ever made it was Kansas. The tornadoes always break my tears. Dear grandmother, I now know you were born in Qingwanxian, Hebei province. I Google Hebei and see it is in the north of China, where all the good doughy food mother used to make comes from, the baozi, jiaozi, and shaobing. I can see how close you were to Beijing in Mongolia. And then it keeps going for a couple pages. But that gives you a sense of what's going on in that book. Oh, I keep going the wrong way. And then I made some more collages where I would grab photos, and initially I actually glued them on, and then I thought that didn't seem right. So I kind of cut them out and then left them sort of alight on the page. And then I started kind of folding them a little bit, so there are little creases on there. But I'll read you this one if I could find the page. I didn't mark my pages because I was too busy talking to Ander and did not prepare appropriately. Distracted and having a nice time. And we're talking about all sorts of things actually, because he had a reading last night and a movie viewing, Predator. And we were talking about how I hadn't actually seen that before. So, okay, I still haven't found it. Let's see, paper slips 83. Let's try that. I think that's probably it. Okay, so this picture in the middle, I'm guessing, is my mother's mother. So it's my great-grandmother. And the person right above her looks a lot like my mom. And then the other people I think are siblings. There could be 1 or 2 missing. I couldn't tell you how many siblings she had, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are probably 2 more. Anyway, I wrote a poem. Once you had to stand behind your grandmother who left a country, each of your feet lifted off the land onto the boat like nightingales. I imagine the night sky, you below deck, light coming from 2 moons, but only half of your face lit up. You stood still as the moons rearranged themselves. During the switch, language was lost at sea. When language belongs to no one, a door opens. Oh, and then my dad worked for Ford Motor Company for most of his career, so I wrote him a little poem here. This is a letter I found that was really funny and also sad. Like, he had full attendance almost every year for this long period of time. And while I was looking at the dates, I was thinking about what I was doing, and then I felt really bad and guilty because I was not thinking about my father having full attendance and working really hard to support his family. Then else guilt came in, but I was also like, who would have full attendance? It's just not healthy. Like, that wouldn't fly today, right? But I'll read you this tiny poem I wrote for him. Was this your first job? Look at the window behind you as if leaving a country was all perspective and light. I wonder what is in your hand. It's so thin and small, it must be my home. And my friend who's an artist said, put a thumbprint onto that little index card and just make a little indentation, just like your dad who's holding a card in his hand. So it was fun to work with her on this, and she gave me a lot of good ideas. So I'm going to keep going. I won't read you that. And I just messed around with all sorts of things. We had a restaurant growing up. Okay, so I'm going to read you some poems from this other book. And then I'm going to read you like 2 new poems. Okay, just give you a sense of where we're going if you like maps. I like maps. So this book is called The Trees Witness Everything, and it's very pink and thin. It reminds me of the old AAA maps that we used to have when we had maps in the car, and we would try to open them in the car. And I love the size of it. It's just a cool physical object. And I was explaining to the class that multiple classes, that I don't really like to tell the designers what to do. So I just didn't want anything literal. So no trees, no bark, no owls. And they did come through with a whole bunch of those. And I said nothing. And then they came up with this, and I thought this was really cool. It looked a lot like those Jenny Holzer, like art, and then or Dan Flavin neon lights and stuff. So I thought it was great with a dot matrix on it. It was very cool. So I'll just read a few tiny poems. These are all in syllabic forms, and they're all different forms. I talk about that in the back, so I won't even tell you what they are, but they're like 5s, and lots of 5s and a lot of 7s. And I will let you read along with me if you want to read along with me. And they're W.S. Merwin titles. And I rarely write this way, go kind of backwards or maybe forwards, or I really was trying hard not to write about anything. So in order to avoid subject matter altogether, I sort of wanted to think of ways to embody someone else's subject matter in mind. So W.S. Merwin is a poet I love who has these really like capacious titles. And as I read them, you'll see they're just really open, and therefore gave me a lot of room to move around in a tiny miniature space. Far along in the story, once I sat in rain, opened my mouth to the sky. I yearned to be changed, but each drop was a small knife. At first I fainted, but when I woke up, all the ticking had gone and all the centuries were won. My choices no longer hurt. Losing a language. We were born with a large door on our backs. When will we know if it opens? Snowfall. We say the snow falls, but it really seizes. Because it is light, it takes 7 years to grab. By the time it does, the old wars are over and my mother is dead. But it lands on the new wars, melts on a different mother. Still morning. No mornings are still. The newly dead move the most. They force flowers to dilate. I have the worst eyes, I can't think. The string. Half of the tree is in my window, the same half I see each weekend, where addictions ebb and flow, where desire is a needle I shoot myself with. When the earth rotates, a person not tied down with longing falls off into space. Rain at night. To be the last drop of rain each night is sadness. It shuts the last door and jumps. Let's see. I'll just read the gods. The fact that leaves can't be put back on trees makes me think that you do not exist. The lovers. There is a wildfire starving on top of a lake. See how the water holds fire but cannot end it? We insist on love when all we want is mercy. I don't know if I want to read you that. I wrote a whole bunch of poems in the middle that I'm not going to read to you. Maybe I'll tell you about. They're called Marfa, Texas. I went to Marfa. Has anyone been there? Probably a lot of you, yeah. It's a really cool art town, and there's a lot of Donald Judd work there, which is very rectangular. So I wrote these poems and put them into little rectangles, but I put them in the middle of the book, and they were really fun to write. They were actually poem letters to a friend. And then I wrote a bunch of little tiny poems that at the end are called love letters, and they're actually like, the assignment from the Los Angeles County Public Library was to write hopeful poems. And for a poet like me, that's very difficult. So they were running across LED lights to the public at libraries all across LA. And so were poems that the other people had written that we had selected. So I'll just read you the last 5 of these. It was my attempt to be hopeful. I don't know if ultimately I'm successful or not, but I'll read them to you. Actually, I'll read you the last ones there, these. There is a bird and a stone in your body. Your job is not to kill the bird with a stone. Not that hopeful, right? Some of us are made only of nerve endings. At night, we light up like radium. A little more, getting there by the end. One day you will wake up beating, one day you will wake up winged. A little more. Let me tell you a story about hope. It always starts and ends with birds. So you see the struggle, it was hard. Took me a while, and there are about 20 or 30 more of those before that. So I think it took that whole time to get. I said, I'll just put the word hope in, and that then it counts. I'm going to read 2 more poems, and these are new poems. And so I'm just going to read them to you because I really liked writing them. And they're ekphrastic poems. So they're based on the artwork of Agnes Martin. And does anyone know that work? Do you like it? Yeah. So it's really huge. Lots of times it's 10 by 10. And there are these little rectangles that she used, or stripes, and really like mathematical work. And it appeals to me because it's just filled with feeling, though you wouldn't think so. So I'll read this one and show you the piece, and then I'll show you the piece first for the next one, and I'll read you the poem. So we'll reverse the order. This one's called Untitled, number 9, 1995. Agnes only had 9 years to live. The angels must have begun to hover around her canvas like monkeys. This canvas has 9 white, thin strips between the red and blue ones. I've spent my life thinking about the blue ones, thinking they were the future, but the future was red all along. I sense something is ending, but I'm not sure what. Maybe it's the future. This morning, I looked at a large spider web above my car. When I returned 10 minutes later, the weaver was gone, the web dismantled, but my hands were still open. Maybe a life doesn't matter so much as the feeling it leaves behind, whether anyone receives the feeling or not. Maybe our goal is to spend all the light, since none of us asked to be born. And here's the piece that's untitled, number 9, 1995. And I'll read one more poem, and I'll show you the piece while I'm reading it. No, wrong way. Has anyone seen this one? I love this one. This one's in the MoMA, New York right now. It's made with gold leaf, and I think it's the only piece that she made with gold leaf. And the grids were actually glued on there one by one and cut out. I don't think they were scored. I haven't read anything about that process, but it's so beautiful, and it's called Friendship 1963. Thank you for coming. I came to the city so I could see gold. When I arrived, though, the leaves were gold too, and I became confused. I called the front desk 4 times, and Angel answered each time. By the 3rd call, he ended with, "Talk soon." In the morning, a different man answered, and I burst into tears. On 53rd Street, small children kept on running into me. A father yelled so loudly at the boy on the scooter that I thought he knew I was carrying death on my back. By the time I arrived at the museum, there was a long line. The bald man in front of me kept turning around to look at me. I could tell by his forehead that he could hurt me. When I finally found the room, I was the only one in there. Everyone else was below me in the Picasso room. While I stared at the gold rectangles, 2 attendants talked about whether to work overtime and get paid time and a half. I wanted to tell them that there's no such thing as time, just time and a half. Sometime in the night, Ital Adnan had died. I had just seen her paintings the day before. The crowds were large, and I wondered whether our looking had accelerated her death. When I took a photo of Agnes's piece, I saw my dark reflection on the gold. I started counting the grids, but the bald man came up next to me. Suddenly, there were 2 dark shadows on the gold. I asked him to step away, but when he said no, it was Agnes's voice. Thank you.
Let's give another round of applause for Victoria Chang. That was beautiful. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you so much for coming tonight, Victoria. We'll stick around to sign books, and we have them for sale right over here. We'll see you all next week for Rita Dove. Thank you. Have a good night.